Hello and welcome to Tifo IRL. I'm Alex. I'm an analyst for Tifo and today I'm looking at Belgium. If you like our new channel, Tifo IRL, and you like this sort of video, then please do subscribe, comment on the videos, get involved with that. It's really very helpful to us when people participate in the channel. The other thing I'd like to say before we get started is that there is still building work. If you've watched any of our previous videos on this channel, you'll know that it's a perennial problem. My apologies for that. Obviously, we can't do anything about it. So today we're going to look at Belgium. We're going to look at the squad first a little bit, how they attack, how they defend, what they're good at, what they're not so good at, and why they are rated so highly for this tournament. So Belgium's squad. Obviously, Belgium have a really good squad. That's why they are the #1 ranked team in the world. It's why a lot of people have them as a favourite, at least for this tournament. In players like Thibaut Courtois, they've got one of the best goalkeepers in the world, Kevin De Bruyne, one of the best playmakers, Lukaku, one of the best strikers. However, there are issues with this squad. They are the most experienced in the tournament in terms of caps per player, but they are also the oldest. And that's particularly a problem with the centre-backs, where they're not quite as, let's say, athletic and quick as they were before. There are also injury issues. So Axel Witsel, who is the Borussia Dortmund defensive midfielder, he's not played club football since January. Eden Hazard hasn't featured for Belgium for 18 months and has barely managed to get a game for Real Madrid. And Kevin De Bruyne is carrying a face knock from the Champions League final when Rudiger cleared him out, and he may miss the first couple of games. So let's have a look at Belgium's probable ideal starting lineup and then show some of the options that might come in if those injury problems are there. Axel Witsel, probably going to be replaced by Leon Den Donker. Similar kind of player in terms of physicality. Den Donker's actually a little bit more aggressive and attacking, so that might not be the worst thing in the world. De Bruyne could play as a central midfielder, but if he doesn't play, it's likely that Leandro Trossard will take that role up there, or possibly Jeremy Doku, who's a young, exciting player, youngest player in the squad actually. Romelu Lukaku, obviously he's going to start the big games, but it is worth noting that Michy Batshuayi, who's his understudy, the two of them have the second and third best caps to goals ratio in the tournament, behind only Serge Gnabry. That's from a really good piece, by the way, in The Athletic that Tom Warville and Mark Carey have done, going through all of the stats and facts for the tournament. So I would advise you to check that out. Let's also look at other parts of the pitch. Right, so Thorgan Hazard here on the left wing back role. They've got quite a few good options here. Could be Yannick Carrasco, could be Nacer Chadli. Carrasco's won La Liga with Atletico Madrid, but Hazard's probably going to start that role. Here, very much a pick-em from Thomas Meunier and Timothy Castagne. Castagne's had a fantastic season at Leicester City and is a really aggressive attacking wing-back, but Meunier is also top class. Tielemans probably going to start. A very, very complete midfielder, one of the best eights in world football. And here at the back, I think it's likely that Roberto Martinez will pick this back three unless he really has to. The options, Diedrich Boyata, where's Diedrich Boyata? I can't bring Boyata on. And Thomas Vermaelen, who is playing in Japan. They're the sort of stand-ins for any one of these three guys. But I think it's very likely that Martinez will not disrupt that if he can help it, because, as I say, Belgium are not particularly strong in the back lineup. So now let's have a quick look at how Belgium attack, having run through the options of who's likely to play where. Okay, so how do Belgium attack and build up? Well, Roberto Martinez has very consistently used a 3-4-3 that looks kind of like a 3-4-2-1, those wide players tucking inside a little bit. In terms of how they build up at the back, well, what we'll expect to see is the centre-backs splitting nice and wide here. The midfield double pivot dropping in and keeping fairly narrow, and the wing backs pushing up relatively high. What the wide centre backs will try to do where possible is carry the ball past the first line of the press ideally, but if not up to the first line of the press. And the reason for this is that Belgium want to try and build little triangles in midfield. So here we have one such triangle. The reason that they do this is because they want to attract opposition players across, and by circulating the ball well between quick technical players or technical players with quick feet, they're able to move the ball in tight spaces between themselves and attract the opposition across. That is something that they'll do on either side. It's also worth noting that if they progress the ball, relatively high up the pitch, let's say that they're up here, but the opposition have really got them hemmed in pretty well, then they're not afraid to just recycle and go all the way back and begin again. And again, you'll then see the dropping in, that position starting to come. So they'll try and get the ball forward in the wide areas, but they'll go back if things don't go according to plan. Now, this triangle thing, they like to do it particularly on the right-hand side. And there are two reasons for that. Reason one is Kevin De Bruyne. As we've said, Kevin De Bruyne is a world-class playmaker. And as everybody who watches the Premier League knows, Kevin De Bruyne is particularly good at delivering crosses from this sort of right half space area. Crosses that will bend inside and be really good for forwards to attack. One of the other reasons that Belgium do this on the right-hand side is that because on the left-hand side, they have a slightly different setup. So while the right wing back, whether it's Meunier or Castagnier, is very much a classic right wing back, on the left-hand side, Thorgan Hazard or Carrasco are more like wingers. Thorgan Hazard, to be fair, is actually almost a 10 or an inverted forward. So what you have is a nice opportunity for those players who are more attacking minded to make late runs and attack the box if the opposition are concentrating on what Belgium are doing on Belgium's right-hand side. So I'll show you what I mean by that. If Kevin De Bruyne has the ball here, let's give him the ball to make this clear. The first thing that you're going to see is Belgium will be adopting as high a line as possible. The midfield double pivot will move up so that they've got this area secured here. Obviously, Lukaku is going to lurk and do what he can to provide the opposition centre-backs with an issue. Because De Bruyne is as good as he is, teams will very often double up on him. And that could see a kind of shifting across here. You might have to see this left winger kind of tucking back inside. And what that does is it means that Meunier has got a couple of options. He's either in space for a pass back, which then allows him to do a cross or maybe a pass inside, or he's got a nice clear run into this area and De Bruyne will then be able to pass the ball to him. No, the ball needs to move, not Kevin De Bruyne. And then the ball can come in from there. This is very much a function of the fact that De Bruyne is as good as he is and as dangerous as he is. His ability to keep the ball in tight spaces. De Bruyne is a lot more physical than people sometimes think of him being, so he can hold players off. He'll attract that kind of double marking, and that just creates so much space around him for the overlapping run, the little pass back inside. What then happens, and this is crucial, is that these guys, let's get rid of these arrows here so that it's not so confusing. These guys here, Hazard and Mertens, are going to have kind of, not a free run necessarily, but they're very, very likely to be outnumbering the right fullback in the opposition area. So Hazard can make these late runs in here. Mertens can either make a run that kind of comes through the channel there or linger at the edge of the box. And obviously Lukaku is the kind of striker who's going to tie up at least one centre-back, possibly even two. He's, a real threat moving in here. So all of a sudden, Belgium are able not only to attack the box in dangerous positions with runners that are coming from a place where defenders find it quite hard to track those movements. They've also got this tight midfield bunch here, so any kind of knockbacks, any clearances, half clearances will likely be hoovered up by these guys pretty easily. And it's worth noting that Tielemans is an exceptional shooter from this sort of distance. You know, he can take 1 or 2 touch hits and score really good goals from this position. So they're very dangerous pushing up like this. And at the back, these guys will defend this space quite aggressively. Denayer particularly will be the centre back who moves up and forwards to try and win aerial balls if the ball looks like it's going to hit in this area. Denayer will be very aggressive defending this space while Vertonghen and Alderweireld will sort of tuck in. So Belgium's triangles allow them to draw the opposition to one side and then switch the play or have those late runners attacking. And that's something that they do with real frequency. It's something that teams are probably knowing that they're going to do, but because of the quality of players like De Bruyne and also of the wing backs, it just makes it really, really hard to stop. Belgium do have 2 other ways of attacking, and if we just reset the board slightly, it's worth noting both of them. If you remember the World Cup game that Belgium had against Japan, there was a fantastic counter-attack that came through the centre. Thibaut Courtois rolled the ball forwards and a midfielder, I can't remember who it was, carried the ball up, a couple of quick passes, and Belgium were in. And in Romelu Lukaku, Belgium do have a striker that they can always go long to. Courtois is pretty decent with the ball at feet. He's also pretty good at rolling it out. But also you can have Belgium counter-attacks that are very, very central. So they'll do this stuff down the wings where the build-up is slower and more patient. And like I say, they'll recycle it if they need to. But if the opportunity is on for a series of very quick vertical passes, whether it's from Courtois to a centre-back, Courtois to Tielemans, who then strikes it forwards, because they've got Lukaku, and also say if Jeremy Doku plays in that right inside forward role, he's rapid, Belgium can quickly counter-attack and go long and will do so quite happily. They'll also hit the wide areas quickly. If the wing-back happens to be in lots of space, you'll get a direct pass from the full-back to the wing-back. The wing-back will hit Lukaku, goal. So while Belgium generally want to be patient, generally want to work these clever little triangles, they're also absolutely lethal on the break. Now, something about the way they press is kind of instrumental to this. So we'll now look at how Belgium defend, and I'll talk a bit about that. So how do Belgium defend? Well, we talked in the last section a little bit about the pressing, and I'm going to show you in a second how they do that and how it facilitates their counter-attacking game. But it's worth paying attention to Belgium's defence, because if Belgium don't do well in this tournament, it's probably going to be as a result of the sorts of issues that they will have in their defence. Now that's partly because Alderweireld, Vertonghen, whether it's Vermaelen coming in, for example, they are slower than they were. They're still capable readers of the game and they're good passers, but it's very much Belgium's area of weakness. Jason Denayer is a good, solid pro, but he's not Vincent Kompany. So it's worth really focusing on a couple of these Belgian issues because teams are going to be able to exploit that. If we look first though at the pressing, it's just something that's worth noting. So Belgium will press quite high. And let's say that this centre-back has got the ball here. That's being quite awkward. There we go. Lukaku's going to go after the ball. Now, Lukaku is a good presser. Like, he's a strong physical player. He's quick. What Belgium will then look to do is they'll look to press in a kind of square behind Lukaku. And that means that they won't necessarily immediately occupy themselves with their opposite numbers. The wing-backs will press really high, really, really high sometimes, and try and kind of shut this line off. But what's important about this square here is that the aim, and if you've got Romelu Lukaku bearing down on you, I can fully understand this happening. The aim is to get the defender to lump the ball long. As he lumps the ball long, Belgium are going to push up here like this, and Denier particularly is going to try and win this ball in the air. As the opposition move out, because they've just cleared it, they are going to leave a little bit of space, and Belgium have 4 players in this very, very dangerous attacking zone. And that's really important, because what it does is, as Denier then, let's say he wins his header here, or Witsel drops back a little bit, Belgium are immediately set up to counter rapidly through the lines. Now this square might happen a little bit deeper, but the point is that Belgium will vigorously press the central area, specifically so they have a lot of players for when they win the ball back, and that allows them to counter-attack very quickly. With the wing-backs in advanced positions as well, there are out balls out wide, and this kind of very proactive defensive approach is something that yields quite a lot of opportunities for Belgium. Obviously with De Bruyne as well, with Tielemans, they've got players in that kind of midfield area who are good at pressing, who are aggressive and physical, and it's the sort of thing where Belgium will, obviously they're not going to try to give the ball away in order to counter press like some teams do, but they're not scared of the ball being given away and then cleared long, because they have a way that's immediately set up to exploit that. And if you've got players like Tielemans, for example, or De Bruyne, who also are capable of literally one defense-splitting pass to set Lukaku free, then that's a very, very effective weapon. However, it is also quite high risk. And there are 2 things that Belgium do which are risky and that opposition teams can exploit. So if we have a look at those, let's clear off some of these lines. As we've talked about before, in this, let's call it a back 5 now. Let's have these people on side a little bit, otherwise people are aggravated by that. Thorgan Hazard or Chadli or Carrasco are not a natural left wing back, whereas on the right hand side, Meunier or Castagnet absolutely are. If Belgium are falling back here in this defensive shape, 2 things quite often happen. Firstly, you'll get a kind of dogleg, because the left-sided wing-back is often so much higher or making one of these runs into the box here. So obviously they're going to be slower to get back. And what I mean by a dogleg is there's a fairly natural back 4 shape here, like this, and then there's a big old gap and a kind of bend to where this player is. Now that's not ideal, because if the opposition are moving up effectively and these guys are having to move back together because the opposition are coming to them, there's going to be a space here behind this wing back, and that's a space that plenty of teams recently have exploited against Belgium. The other reason they can exploit it is because of the way the wing backs press. So if, let's say this player here has got the ball, there's a player here, even if Thorgan Hazard is starting back here, he's going to look to press this space really, really aggressively. Witsel and Tielemans are much, much more inclined to stay narrow and to protect this central area here. And that's partly because they want to protect the central area, it's partly because they also want to form a pivot so that when Belgium get the ball back, it's nice and easy for them to pass out. So the defensive responsibility for this left-hand side really sits with Thorgan Hazard. He's going to come rushing up here like this, and if he gets it wrong, this guy does a little shimmy, oh, Hazard's running off down that way, all of a sudden look at that space. And again, teams recently, and I'm talking about the Czech Republic, talking about Denmark, have exploited this against Belgium several times. That then coupled with the fact that the Belgian centre-backs are not quite as good as maybe they were, it means that crosses from that left-hand side, from Belgium's left-hand side, from the opposition's right-hand side, can be really dangerous, because the centre-backs might be slow to react, they might switch off a little bit, and all of a sudden you've got players hitting the box the opposition player on the right-hand side has got the time and the space to pick his pass, maybe to look for a cut back to an on-rushing midfielder rather than a cross to a centre forward. And Belgium can't recover that shape quickly enough. And that's something that has happened quite a lot. Now, the issue with it for Belgium is that it's a direct result of what they do in terms of their build-up, in terms of their other defensive structure, and in terms of their selections. So if they are to mitigate that, they're going to have to ask their left wing back to do something that basically badly affects everything else they're supposed to do. So this is not going to change as an issue for Belgium. It's something that teams will know about, it's something that teams will look to exploit, and you will see Belgium conceding goals from that side. That's probably as predictive as I'll ever be in one of these videos. In terms of the defensive structure, otherwise, it's just worth noting again that this double pivot here is very, very solid and very secure, and will afford Belgium the opportunity, should they clear the ball or should Courtois gather it, for these quick counters down the centre. And that's where Belgium are going to be particularly lethal. So we've had a look at how Belgium attack, we've had a look at how they defend, we've seen what they're good at, what they're not good at. It's very likely that they will get out of their group. It seems hard to imagine that unless those injury problems really, really hit them deep. And it is worth saying, a couple of injuries to their centre-backs. Martinez hasn't played a system that's not a back three for ages and ages. So if they lose two centre-backs to injuries, they're really, really going to have to adjust and either change system, which would be a drastic issue, or have, I don't know, maybe like Castagnier filling in as a right-sided centre-back, which he has done for Leicester. But it's not going to take much to unsettle that Belgian defence in terms of selection. But if they go forwards and they get the ball to the right people, then they can play some absolutely scintillating football. So that's Belgium. Thanks very much for watching. As I say, I hope you enjoy what we're doing on this new channel. If you do like this video, please give it a like. If you want to make some comments, please put those in. We'll try and engage with those as well. Yeah, we'll see you soon.